Hey guys, so just going through a couple of questions from the recent webinar, and the one here, this question, and I would refer you to Dr. Lindley Howard Payne's interview that we had in one of the webinars on the channel a couple of weeks ago. But broadly speaking, in terms of this question, what is the difference between Straussian and constructivist grounded theory? Okay, so maybe a little bit of context here. Strauss and Glaser were the original proponents of grounded theory, and they diverged eventually in their approaches to, or their variations of grounded theory, if you like. So Anselm Strauss, preferred slightly more the approach where it was an emergence of the theory or the emergence of the process that allowed the researcher to be a lot more intimately involved in the gathering of data and the development of the theory, whereas Glaser was very much more structured and rigid and sort of a fixed mindset, if you like, in terms of how that theory would be developed. And as I understand it, Charmaz, who sort of developed a study of constructivist grounded theory, followed actually more the Straussian approach, where there is this much more emergence, in the process that comes through the work that a grounded theory researcher does. So I think the question is more, what is the difference between Strauss and Charmaz on the one side and Glaser and the proponents of his approach on the other side? So just to recap, Glaser is far more structured and predefined in the sort of rigid methodology of grounded theory, whereas Strauss and Charmaz and others that have followed them, and certainly the approach that I followed, was that it's very much more emergent and very much more in terms of listening and understanding and allowing the data to be for there to be a relationship really between the data and the researcher. Whereas Glauser, said that the data must speak for itself. And for example, what Glaser said is you shouldn't do a literature review before you actually enter into the field, because you could be biased because of that reading based on the data that you analyze. So, Glaser almost said that if you did a literature review, you'd be affecting how you interpreted the data. Whereas, Strauss says, well, do a minimal literature review, have some knowledge of the field, because the researcher themselves is actively participating in the research process. And then you place a bit of emphasis on this topic of theoretical sensitivity. How sensitive are you to the theory that is emerging from the data, and how well do you account for the bias that you may have imprinted on that data collection process? That's certainly something that I included in my PhD and something to think about. But I'm by no means an expert on grounded theory. Dr. Lindley Howard Payne is my go-to expert on the topic, so go back and go check on the channel. You'll very quickly see that in one of the live sessions that we've had previously.